So what I wanted to do this morning is talk a little bit about, first of all, what this whole idea of small means, kind of how I came to this place, and why I think it's really an important part of the conversation around real estate development. Because for many, many years, as Jason said, we've been doing big stuff, and I'm not sure it served our communities well as the only alternative. I think there are times when it's the appropriate thing, but I think there's other methods that we've forgotten how to do, and that's why y'all are here. So I want to start with this this quote, because one of my New Year's resolutions was to listen to more podcasts, and there's this great podcast that Eve Picker does called Small Change. And if you don't know Eve, you should definitely look her up, smallchange.co. But he said, real estate is the most impactful and important thing to combat the ills and challenges of today. And I so love this because it resonated with what I believe about real estate development. Unfortunately, the industry has really become focused on transactions, financial engineering. I think over decades, we've lost our commitment to the built environment and what we do and how it impacts humanity. And so, but there's an opportunity to bring that back and be a noble profession. And all of you that are getting started or thinking about this need to think about the role and responsibility real estate development brings to the communities in which you live. It's not just about the money. You're building stuff that's going to last for generations, things that have an impact on people economically, socially, environmentally, and you need to take that responsibility seriously. My background is I'm a landscape architect. I was trained, been at it for 40 years. About halfway through, got frustrated that most of the stuff I built or drew never got built. So went back and did a real estate master's. But a lot of my work was very much in the big arena, this kind of stuff, big master plan communities, which I know you have a lot of in Houston. And it was all about perfection and predicting the future. And yet, while I was working on projects like that, I was hanging out in places like this, what I call the nooks and crannies of communities, the alleys, the backways, the adaptive reuse. This is a great little project in Portland, Oregon, small developer named Kevin Kavanaugh from Guerrilla Development. And this was a little corner auto repair shop. And I got to thinking one day, there's a lot more places like this around the country than there are 25,000 acre greenfield sites in the Nevada desert. And Kevin's thesis on this was, sometimes highest and best use is not always the highest and best use for the community. So instead of building 150 apartments on this site, he built a five bay incubator kitchen, which actually provided a third place for the neighborhood, a chance for local chefs to kind of start their craft and their business, and create a very simple, low risk development for Kevin himself. So with that thesis in mind, that this idea of these smaller kind of surgical insertions in communities could add a lot more value than those big projects, I set off to write this book called Building Small. And it had a couple of purposes when I wrote it, but one of the main things was to make it very accessible to individuals and entrepreneurs like yourselves to understand the real estate development process from a small perspective, not from a, what you're going to get from your father's textbook on real estate. This is what is different about building small, the kinds of impact it has in communities, and what it takes from a personal kind of fortitude and step-by-step process to get it done. And to really serve not only as an inspiration, but also as a resource that you could use time and again. But not only for entrepreneurs, I wanted it to go to electeds, civic leaders, and even citizen activists who often, when I would travel around the country in my consulting role and I would talk about small and I would show them projects, they'd say, yeah, that's what we want in our neighborhood. We want more small mom and pop businesses. We want more locally owned businesses that come from existing buildings. And I would say to them, but do you know how hard you have made it? Between your regulations and your NIMBY attitudes and the inaccessibility of capital, you've made what you're saying you want really, really difficult. So if you get this book and you read it and you enjoy it, I'd encourage you to buy another copy and give it to a council person, give it to a mayor, give it to somebody in your neighborhood that wants to talk about great design and great community, but doesn't really understand the challenges of being a developer. So I want to talk a little bit about, first of all, what do I mean by small? And then I'm just going to show you a couple of quick case studies and so the what and why is small. So, this was small. This was how we used to build communities. This was one of my favorite images. It's from New York Historical Society. And this was the way we built communities. A guy on the left bought a parcel. He bought two parcels next to it. He built a brownstone that his family could live in. And he built two brownstones next to that he could rent to some friends. That paid the mortgage, but it also provided his friends or people that worked with him a dignified place to live that was affordable. And then down the street, somebody else bought a couple of lots and they built a couple of townhomes. And then somebody else built a couple of townhomes. And over time, organically, kind of accretively, the block filled in, the buildings filled the block, made the streets that became the neighborhoods that we love the most. And we've kind of forgotten how to do that. Now it's merchant builders filling up brand new greenfield sites. And yet this is really the fabric and the places that, we all love. Fast forward to today, here's a great example of somebody who's done that again. This could be you. This is an architect in Oklahoma City named Sam Day. He's about 25 years old. And he went to, I don't know if you're seeing all this stuff on my screen here that's popping up. Oh no. Okay. He wanted to build a place that he could live in, that he could rent to his colleagues that was at an affordable price, and he wanted to do it with just a standard conventional loan. So he backed into doing the math of how much rent could he get from those four, what kind of a loan could he get, how much of a down payment could he get, and then bought this single family empty lot in the Plaza District in Oklahoma City, which was kind of an emerging, transitioning neighborhood, and built this little fourplex unit apartment. And he lives in one and rents the other three. And it's a really lovely, beautifully detailed, but very simple building. Sorry, what do we got going on here? Okay, so a lot of people say to me, because real estate's such a quantitative industry, it's like, okay, well, how big is small? How many dollars goes into it? How big, how many square feet? And I say, it's not a quantitative discussion. It's a qualitative discussion. It's the values that you hold and the way that you think about real estate. It's not a product. When the book came out, I had a lot of friends come out and say, oh, I love tiny houses. Is this all about tiny houses? I was like, well, tiny houses is one way of building small, but it is not a book on tiny houses. It's not about size and dollar value. We have projects that range from, $100,000 to $20 million. It's also not where you wait to scale. I've always thought, some people would say, well, do small, do a couple of projects, then come call me because you want to work in this big corporate environment. No, there's a lot of people who they've made this their life's passion. That's where I am. A number of people, as Jason mentioned, the small scale forum, the 60, 80 people that come to that are all very much interested in small scale development as a way to heal, to build, to aggregate their communities and create something better. And that's where they're spending their careers. Unfortunately, it is not easier than big. And you would think because it's small, it's going to be simpler, it's going to be faster. Unfortunately, it's not easier. Sometimes it's even harder because of the regulatory environment that's been created. We can talk about that another time. But what it is a method for building enduring places. And just like that image I showed you from the Historical Society, that kind of organic evolutionary approach to building or rebuilding communities makes them more enduring. They give more authenticity. They give the residents that live there more of a sense of authorship. They watch the community evolve as opposed to having a 200 unit 4/1 apartment building parachuted into their neighborhood and completely destroy the fabric. Most of the firms that are practicing this area, if you look at their website, they have what I call an expanded scorecard. It's not just about the money. They're looking at social values. They're looking at environmental values. They're looking at contributions to the community and the local economy. So they're thinking about real estate much more holistically than a lot of the just investment driven. We really don't care what we build as long as we get a 22% IRR. And the last thing is, I like to think about small scale development as seeing real estate as the means to the end, not the end itself. And what I mean by that is most of the people that are in the forums, the people that I work with, the people that I know, myself included, we want to build community. We want to build great places. We want to build strong local economies. And the way we do that is through real estate. It's not, again, I can build whatever I want as long as I get 22%. And that's the end is an asset that produces a designated ROI. It's we want to build community. And the way you do that is by building really good real estate. And I'm going to close with this portion before I jump into a couple of case studies with this other quote that I've always loved, which is from a great book. But it's just, when somebody gave it to me, it was like, yeah, this is small. It's how successful places are produced intricately, slowly, and lovingly by individuals, one piece at a time. And when you hear the stories, which is what the book contains, is really based on a lot of these stories, you hear the amount of impact, you hear the amount of passion, you hear the pain and suffering that these people have been through in order to get these projects done. You'll understand what this quote and why it's so powerful for me. Okay, I'm just going to share with you in the time I've got just 3 small case studies so you can kind of get a sense of what the breadth of this kind of work, what's going on around the country, who's doing what, but also, think about this could be you. This could be what you do next. And I've built these 3 case studies around something Jason said the other day in our prep call about, live, work, and play. So I'm going to share with you 3 projects. One's live, one's work, and one's play, but they're all small projects. And this is one that I'm particularly proud of. This is one that I did recently, but it starts here. And again, this could be you. This was the very first house I bought in the community that I live in now. It was a 980 square foot cottage. That's my daughter, who's now grown and working in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's a little bit of a Wayback Machine here, but this was what this thing looked like. And we bought it, and this is what we turned it into. And this was, just a renovation with an ADU in the back. And it's a great place to start because, hey, I had 20 years experience in the construction and design industry. I thought I knew everything. It's such a different, world. So getting your hands dirty, keeping it simple, being able to pivot with a small project is a really great place to start. Through those experiences and through the years, then I got invited by the city that I live in to lead a year-long series of workshops on housing and housing options. And one of the things that we concluded with, and it's because we're largely a single-family community, we're very expensive. People were very concerned about the cost of housing. And so after a year of kind of going through housing economics, explaining to people in the community through workshops, different types of housing that was emerging, so cottage courts, townhomes, mixed use, all those kinds of things. We did a poll using real-time clickers. If you've ever done those, now most of this stuff is available on your smartphone. But we asked people to rank what kinds of housing we needed more of. And you can see one of the big takeaways from this was on the left, people said they wanted more cottage courts, but more importantly on the right, they said, we don't need any more single-family homes. And the reason this is important is because this was done in a public process before I ever brought a project to the table. And I have a thing that I tell my students, that if your project is the place where a community has a conversation about what they want to be in the future, you're dead. So the ability for the city to actually talk about what kind of housing types are needed opened the door then for me to purchase a site and go into the community and talk about doing a cottage court, because that's what they said they wanted. So I could go to them and say, we bought this site. This is what you said you wanted. Now let's talk about how we get it done. And the way I did that was to show them this image. And I said, this is what your codes tell us we should build. This is what your codes allow me to build. This is what I can do as of right, no discretionary approval. Conversely, this is what I'd like to build. This is what you said you wanted. So do you want this or do you want this? So if you want this, we're going to have a different conversation about the codes and how we work together and collaborate. And this was a game changer in terms of the way people thought about design. So we ended up planning and designing and then building this community, which I'm very proud of. Won a bunch of awards recently for it, but 12 units, 8 homes, 4 ADUs on about a 1.2 acre lot. We did it all with as of right zoning. California, unlike Texas, has some very onerous environmental regulations. We were able to avoid all of those because of what we were doing. And we had 3 unit types. So this gives you an idea, but this was very much about gentle density. This was about front porch living. The cars are stuck in the back. This was about knowing your neighbor and creating kind of a community living room with the green. So this space here was, you see the homes. One of the things I'm particularly proud of, you can see the great trees. We saved 14 of 15 heritage trees on the site. And the 15th one we actually slabbed on site, and you can see it made in the community table, some little stools, and then every house got a piece of it in some way or another on their porch in what we called homage to Tree 31. We also did 4 ADUs, which are 500 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, beautifully designed, lots of volume. You don't need a lot of space. You just need good light and volume, nice little front porch. And actually, that slide that I showed you of my first home was one of the big takeaways from that. Is every time people would come to it at 980 square feet, but it had a lot of volume, a lot of light, they'd say, why don't people build stuff like this anymore? I'd say, well, there's no market incentive to. I said, oh, I would love something smaller. I don't want all that space. So these really started, that really got our minds thinking that we could build smaller and actually sell for more per square foot than what the bigger homes were selling for. And we used the ADUs as part of the fabric. So they weren't just stuck in the backyard. They were actually in the front of some of the lots. So you can see on the far right here, that's an ADU, and its front door and its kind of porch are engaged in the community and the community fabric the same way all of the main homes are. The next one, the work part of the example, is this is a co-working space, again, in the town that I live in. This was something I did about the same time I was doing River House. So I bit off way more than I could chew, which is part of the lesson of the entrepreneur. But this was this. And you probably have a lot of these in your different communities. This was an old, tired 60s shopping center. You can see the arch right there. That was the space. And this is what it looked like when I took it over. It was an old furniture. It was originally a bank, obviously. It was a furniture store, had these horrible colors, but it had this great ceiling and these steel beams. We opened it all up, basically went back to the essence of the building. And it's one of the things we talk a lot about in building small is you see a lot of adaptive reuse because there's this commitment to reestablishing what I like to call the soul of the buildings. Old real estate just has such a great story, has such a great personality. So the ability to bring this space back to life from its origins, stripping off all that sheetrock and the ceiling and everything else and just exposing it really was stunning in terms, and people they come in and they just can't believe what it's become from what they were used to seeing it being. One of the big problems that we had was this, the bank vault. You got this big hunk of concrete in the middle of the space, had that little teeny door, which is a cool piece of hardware, but it doesn't meet ADA requirements. And you had this big space inside. And so we were trying to figure out what to do with it. And, part of building small is being extremely nimble and being extremely creative. And probably a little bit naive. And I said, well, why don't we just cut the back of the vault out? So that's what we did, 2 feet of concrete with this big saw that you see, and then made it into what has become our signature space, premium conference room, sandblasted the walls, walnut paneling. But it's that kind of, when you're working at a small scale like that, you have the agility and the opportunity to be creative and take these kind of lemons and make them into lemonade. The other thing that I do a lot, because again, as I said, this is not just about the money back to me, but I'm always very conscious of and interested in what is the impact that we're having on the community. And so we regularly poll our members to find out how much, now that we've created this place in our downtown, small little downtown, where everybody's coming every day and people are coming in from out of town to hold meetings and stuff like that. How much money is being spent in the shopping center? Because strategically, I wanted to be able, when I renegotiate my lease with the landlord, to be able to tell them how much benefit we've brought to our surrounding tenants. But also when I'm talking to civic leaders and as I go into other communities, to be able to talk about how much economic benefit we've generated for the community. And we're finding that between the rent we're paying and the vendors that we're using and the money that our members are spending, we're adding $500,000 to $700,000 worth of value into the community by, again, creating this ecosystem that is supporting entrepreneurs and what we like to call doers who are working by themselves, off their kitchen tables, get them all in one place, give them a high performance workplace, and let them really excel and support one another. And the other thing that's a big part of it is we wanted it to be a community hub. We wanted it to be the place where people could come and gather, use it for networking, use it for telling stories, use it for personal parties. And so we have this great fireplace lounge that allows people to come and use it. And, anytime, we're open pretty much 18/7. And so it's really become a great magnet for bringing the community together to talk about change and positive things and growth in our community. So I'm going to end with the play one, I guess, if you want to call this play. But this was a great project that we saw in Nashville, Tennessee. Some of you may be familiar with this. And again, like many of you, this guy was a broker, and his specialty was leasing space for restaurants and up-and-coming chefs. And he found that, for a lot of these emerging chefs, there was no place they could go that wasn't going to take them 6 months to a year to get the space built out, and $60,000 to $100,000 worth of capital to get the place built and open and all of that. And a lot of these were immigrants who had moved in recently, and English wasn't their first language. So how were they going to navigate the process? So he found this, and you've probably seen a lot of these around the country, and you probably maybe have one in your neighborhood, an old car wash. And what he did was he bought this, and he converted this took those bays that you normally pull your car into and spray off the dirt. He created 5 incubator kitchens. And the idea here, and the thesis, which he has now built and is up and running, is an entrepreneur, somebody who's really good at food but doesn't know how to get anything built out, is just wanting to start up. Instead of 6 months and $100,000 to get the doors open, they can be in here in 2 days for $3,000 and start doing their craft and making revenue. So he runs the kind of the public space, so all the seating, the busing, all that kind of stuff. They pay him rent, and the rent that they pay is actually twice per square foot what you would normally get for a restaurant in that area. But because the space is so small, the absolute number is less. And it's something that people can understand, because when you're a small business, you don't worry about what you're paying per square foot. You want to know what it's going to cost you each month, and then you figure that into your budget. So to pay 2x what a per square foot rent isn't a big issue. It's really what was my total, and I think it was like $3,000 a month kind of thing. But the fact that they're moving in, the thing's already permitted, the hood's already there, the kitchen's already there, makes it very, very simple for somebody to do what they do best, which is, develop their food craft, not try to figure out how to get a restaurant open. And then the secret sauce is obviously, in most of these places, he has the bar. So I said there's 5 kitchens. The 6th bay is this really sweet little bar. It's become a neighborhood gathering place. And again, like Kevin Kavanaugh's project, it's become a major part of a neighborhood that had no central gathering place. It had no third place. And this is where people go. You meet your neighbors, you can choose, multiple foods, all those kinds of things. So local economic uplift, opportunity for people to gather as a community, revenue and economic growth for him, but also for the community and the businesses that are starting. So I'm going to end with this phrase that I tell a lot of students and people that are getting into this. And I think it's really important, because we all talk in this industry about building projects. I've got this project I'm doing. Oh, what projects are you working on? And I like to think when you're building small, you're not building projects, you're building a brand, because everything that you do is going to create the next opportunity and how that opportunity plays out for you. So River House for me was a long, painful journey. I say I paid a very high tuition for that education. but it's opened the door now to a lot of projects with people coming to me and saying, you know, we have this family land that we've had for generations. We don't want to do the same old thing. We loved what you did. If we put the land in, are you willing to do the project? Or I saw your project. I've got something I'm trying to figure out. Can you help us figure it out? So the notion that everything you do, the relationships you create, the way you interact with others in this profession is so important, because that is your brand, and your brand is the thing that is going to create the opportunities, the access to capital, the accelerated approvals, the support from the local neighbors. So, do yourself right, do good work, and treat people responsibly and like you want to be treated, because it's a very small industry and everybody remembers everybody. So as you're getting started small, you want to be doing it correctly. Just a couple of quick things for you there. There's an online community that's been created. Jason's a part of it. It's free. It's the top URL up there, buildingsmallmn.co. It's kind of like a private LinkedIn for small scale developers, sharing resources. The content from our forums are up there. In scholarships, we have a scholarship program. Jason was a scholar in Philadelphia, chance to apply for those. My LinkedIn profile, and then also my website where a lot of this stuff resides.